At 7:55 in the morning, Detective Inspector Pat North, tall, slim and fair-haired, sat fuming in her car as Capital Radio's flying eye told her about the traffic congestion on the northbound carriageway of Putney Bridge. This wasn't news to North, since she was currently halfway across the bridge and had been stationary for at least 10 minutes. Moreover, there was a pile of paperwork on her desk at Embankment Police Station, which she had hoped to clear before the 10 o'clock inspectors' meeting, to be attended by the Assistant Commissioner himself. They were to be briefed on new security protocols arising from the war in the Balkans. North honestly couldn't see how the military situation would impinge on her life very significantly. Her speciality nowadays was vice, and she hadn't noticed that the bombing of Serbia had led to an upsurge in prostitution, pornography and lewd behaviour in metropolitan London. The morning so far had been a strange mixture of tenderness and tension. She and Walker had been camping in the flat for 5 days, their furniture still not all moved in. Walker had brought her tea at 6:30, sitting on the side of the new bed and kissing her gently. Then he'd started hunting frantically round the bedroom for his lost tie. She knew for a fact he'd been awake at least 90 minutes already. She had felt him rolling out of bed and heard him thumping around the sitting room of the flat. Michael Walker was a detective superintendent in the Metropolitan Police's Area Major Investigation Pool, London's Murder Squad, or AMIP as it is generally known. But with the loose ends of his latest investigation almost tied up, he was beginning to behave like a dog that has licked its bone clean and is on the lookout for another. Not that the man was very different when he did have a fresh case to chew on. If their recently instigated domestic arrangement was going to work out, North would have to get used to Walker's chronic insomnia and his interminable, restless jitters. This morning, while she tried to get back to sleep, he'd paced around the flat, boiled the kettle, surfed TV channels, boiled the kettle again, showered, dressed, and boiled the kettle a third time. That was Mike Walker, insomniac, workaholic, impossible bundle of impatience, and the guy she was in love with. Pat had never seriously considered what it would be like sharing her life with someone else in the job. For years she'd lived with Graham, a gentle, uncomplicated chartered surveyor. When that broke up, she'd gone out with a few guys from the job, mostly because they'd asked. Nothing had amounted to a real relationship, however, not even her on and off thing with Jeff Batchley, the extremely fanciable CID officer she'd first met during last year's Damon Morton inquiry. That had been mostly a matter of lust, a fling. What was going on in her life now was something a good deal more complicated, though no less irrational. She had worked with Walker on 2 murder inquiries in 2 years. He had impressed her from the start with his intelligence and utter dedication. At times he'd tried to dominate and intimidate her, but North had always stood up to him. Finally, on the morning after they both joined a night of celebrations for the final conviction of the multiple murderer Damon Morton, Walker had let his vulnerability show through. Waking up on the sofa of her tiny flat, he told her in stumbling, inarticulate terms about his childhood in the slums of Glasgow, his feelings of guilt about the failure of his marriage to Lynn and about fathering 2 kids he loved but hardly ever saw. Finally, he let North put her arms around him. It was then that he told her how much he seemed to think about her and how he thought maybe he was in love with her. So now she was making a home with him. She had worked out that this would have significant pluses. They both knew the job and were realistic about its extraordinary demands. Neither would harbour cosy expectations about home life. On the other hand, North and Walker worked equally mad hours. To try to knit their lives together into a loving domestic relationship was not just a challenge, it was dicing with disaster. The traffic started moving again at last. For another 5 minutes they crawled until at last North reached the north bank of the Thames. She immediately darted down a side street, skirted the Hurlingham Club, and took her favourite rat run to Chelsea Harbour and the Embankment. In the end she made it to the office by 9:10, by which time she was contemplating her in-tray, stacked even higher than she'd anticipated. Letters, faxes and email printouts, as well as messages sent up from the desk. God, what's all this? You had a look, Jack? Detective Constable Jack Hutchins was a strong, handsome officer in his late 20s. He had a reputation around the station as a young Lothario, with a habit of frankly eyeing up any attractive female who appeared within range. North, certainly attractive enough, but his senior by almost 10 years, was out of his range and he knew it. But he maintained an easy, not quite flirting relationship with her nevertheless. Now he came over with 2 frothy white cappuccinos in styrofoam cups. He handed one over. "You read my mind, I'm gasping," she said gratefully. "Took me over an hour to get here." Hutchins nodded at the stack of paper. He said, "Half of those are from that nutter. If he's not phoning in, he's writing. Now he says he's going to contact his local MP.